Tonight, migration headaches for Rishi Sunak as both he and Keir Starmer head out to campaign across the country. The Prime Minister confirms that flights to Rwanda won't take off before the election on July the 4th, as figures show a record number of asylum seekers were given permission to stay in the UK last year. Meanwhile, Reform UK launched their campaign, branding it the immigration election. But they confirm Nigel Farage won't be standing because he's helping Donald Trump in the US. I'll be joined live in a moment by the Science Minister, Andrew Griffith, to ask if he is worried about the government's track record on migration. Plus, the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice, will be here. Has Farage put Trump before country? Keir Starmer heads to Kent as Labour's campaign gets going. He says that Sunak has deliberately called the election before the Rwanda scheme could be tested. Also with me tonight, Labour's Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, Thomas-Symonds. So how are the opening skirmishes in the election campaign going down so far? We'll be in our target towns of Grimsby and Cleethorpes to find out. And we're going to be tracking the digital campaign wars throughout this election period too. We'll tell you which of the parties was quickest out the blocks over the last 24 hours. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Well, I'm back in the studio tonight after an extraordinary day yesterday outside Downing Street, covering the election announcement from Rishi Sunak that I think it's fair to say caught the entire political class off guard. The parties, though, have reacted pretty quickly, and the campaign launches have come thick and fast throughout the day, and you can tell a lot from where in the country the politicians are jetting off to. So, I'm going to take you on a bit of a tour of the UK. So after his big launch last night, Rishi Sunak set off on a whistle-stops tour around Britain. After a Q&A in Derbyshire here, he then stopped by a brewery in Barry, and now he's all the way up in Inverness. It was a bit of a more muted day for Keir Starmer, though. He kicked off Labour's campaign in Gillingham in Kent. There is a seat held by the Conservatives, which always tells you something. And Ed Davey and the Lib Dems, they were in Cheltenham. That's one of their key targets. Now, they're the dominant party on the local council there, but the parliamentary seat is held by a big Conservative name, the Justice Secretary, Alex Chalk, potentially in the Lib Dem sights. Elsewhere, there were keynote speeches in Edinburgh from the SNP's new leader, John Swinney. He's only been in post a couple of weeks, talk about baptisms of fire. And also in London from Reform UK's leader, Richard Tice, who will be joining us in the studio within the hour. Now, our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, joins us live from Inverness. Sam, you've been following the PM today around since the crack of dawn this morning. Day one done with the campaign. What have you made of it?
That's right, Sophie. It's been an incredibly fast-paced day. The Prime Minister, as you say, up at dawn and straight to Derbyshire in the East Midlands, that key swing part of the country that we saw in the local elections, the mayoralty switch from Tory to Labour. It's been a day of planes, trains and automobiles, although largely in our case slightly grotty coaches, taking us all across the country. The aim of Rishi Sunak is to visit all 4 nations of the United Kingdom in pretty much the first 24 hours of the campaign proper. Why is he doing that? Well, he wants to show that he's got the energy and the enthusiasm and the drive to do this after, quite frankly, months of members of his party questioning whether he's the right man at the helm. He's caught the country by surprise with the announcement about the election yesterday, but now he feels he needs to capitalise on that surprise and to keep going with what his team feel is, to a certain degree, momentum behind the fact that they have sprung this on the country, which is why he's determined to look energetic. At the heart of Rishi Sunak's campaign is a claim that he is the underdog. He says it in campaign events. He's quite upfront about that. When you talk to his staff, when you talk to his aides, he knows that he's got to be a risk taker over the coming days and weeks in order to deal with that 20-point deficit in the polls that the Conservatives have. The question is what he is doing looking like risk? Is what he is attempting to do actually something that's going to change people's minds? And that is what we're looking for on this campaign trail.
I always think you can tell a lot, Sam, by politicians' demeanours on these campaigns, whether it changes, if they grow in confidence or if they kind of shrink away. How would you describe Rishi Sunak's demeanour, having spent the day with him?
Well, it's fascinating watching him, Sophie, because on one level, he's looking incredibly confident in the environment that you will see him in these group chats with individual workers, taking questions, sitting alongside members of the public and invited audiences and dealing with their queries. There's a guy with his shirt sleeves rolled up who is intensely relaxed. But the key, Sophie, is exactly what you are seeing and what you're being allowed to see. Because one of the things that struck me is just how odd modern-day election campaigning has ended up being, because we've dashed around the country, Sophie, but Rishi Sunak has not actually met that many people, because what's been going on is he's done small, tight, controlled events where they've been very careful not to put him in any danger or at any risk.
Sam, thank you very much. Let's hear from Sam's report, shall we, of day one on the campaign trail.
Is what awaits the Prime Minister on the campaign trail. Events designed for the cameras, invited guests, tightly controlled. But for this audience, a helping hand from his staff. His message to the country is that things are getting better under him.
Thanks to all your hard work, all your sacrifice, your resilience, we've really made progress. And I know it will take time for you to all see the benefits of that. The plan is working, and we have that economic stability back.
This crowd in Derby was billed by Conservative HQ as staff. They seemed impressed, but it later emerged that two of the men, wearing high-vis and asking questions of the Prime Minister, were actually Tory councillors. A brief stop on the trail, the first of a tour of 4 nations in 2 days. That only possible because of this, a private jet funded by Tory donors. One plane that will take off this side of an election.
Here we go.
Taking migrants to Rwanda, a key Tory pledge. But today he admitted no prospects of flights taking off before voting in July. Nor was there much comfort in today's migration stats, marginally down from a record high. Stop 2 on the trail, Cardiff, the Prime Minister fast discovering that campaign small talk can be a challenge.
If you're looking forward to all the football?
Not so much my bag.
Well, you get people in.
No, but that's because you guys aren't in it.
An intimate brewery tour. This teetotaler
Right, let's go. Right, so we'll pop these back here.
not meeting many voters here. Rishi Sunak on a whirlwind tour of the UK nations, but he needs much bigger wins than the ones you get on campaign stops like this. But he does appear to have achieved one of his goals from going early, wrong-footing the rival party to his right, Reform UK. Reform leader Richard Tice unveiling his campaign, but after months of speculation, Nigel Farage not standing to be an MP. He insists he'll be a force on the campaign trail instead.
I'm absolutely delighted during this election campaign that my good friend Nigel Farage will be helping out significantly in campaigning to drive home the message of Reform UK and how we can save Britain.
The favourite to be the next Prime Minister is not taking any risks. Get used to hearing these lines.
At long last, the election has been called. The time has come and the wait is over. 2 different countries, 2 different futures. Decline and chaos continuing under Tories, or rebuilding our country under Labour. The power of the vote is with you.
Ready? Right, cheering, let's go.
The Lib Dems launching with a bang of sorts, their leader certain who his party is against.
It really is time for change, and that means the Conservatives have to go. And across the country, we've seen so many parts of the country where it's a vote for the Liberal Democrats that will get rid of the Conservative MP.
This man wants nothing to do with the rest of them. The new First Minister of Scotland says vote SNP to leave the UK behind.
We will win our country's independence and win the powers to bring about a better Scotland through democratic pressure. So, on July the 4th, Independence Day, make sure your voice is heard.
Ending the day in Scotland. Changing voters' opinions now means this man taking more risks. He says he's the underdog. Is he prepared to behave like one?
Sam Coates reporting there. Well, tonight we're going to be talking immigration, which feels fitting on a day when Rishi Sunak has said that flights to Rwanda won't take off before the next election. Like it or not, it's going to be a major feature of this election campaign. Nigel Farage might have ruled out standing as a candidate, but he's quit his GB News gig in order to campaign for reform. And Number 10 are pretty worried about losing support on the right if reform cannibalises their once core vote. But here's the thing about the Conservatives' election strategy. When it comes to immigration, they want to talk about something that hasn't happened yet, flights to Rwanda. What they don't want to talk about so much is their record in government. Now, in just a moment, we'll be hearing from Andrew Griffith, but let's just have a little listen to a report that we made before.
We will reduce net migration from the hundreds of thousands to the tens of thousands.
And immigration will be at levels our country can manage. No ifs, no buts.
We're bringing down the numbers to sustainable levels.
Net migration needs to come down radically from hundreds of thousands a year to just tens of thousands. Immigration benefits Britain, but it needs to be controlled, it needs to be fair.
Britain does not need net migration in the hundreds of thousands every year.
So work with us, not against us, and we'll better control immigration.
Brexit must mean control of the number of people who come to Britain from Europe.
What people want and what they will get is control of our own immigration system.
But I am clear that our immigration system must change.
Because our asylum system is fundamentally broken, and we have a responsibility to act. Our immigration system is broken, and we will fix it.
Uncontrolled immigration creates unmanageable demands on our NHS and on our welfare state.
We were too slow to recognise the scale of the problem, too unwilling to accept that our legal framework needed to be updated.
Well, with us now is Andrew Griffith from the Conservatives, the Science Minister. Great to have you here on day one of campaigning. We just saw there the Conservative Party's record on immigration. What adjective would you use to describe it?
Well, what you saw actually is that this is a long-standing challenge. It's a challenge that we see across the whole of Europe. I mean, big parts of the world's population is on the move. We've seen failed states. And it's true, it's taken a long time to get to grips with. We've passed a number of different legislative structures. We now do have a points-based immigration scheme. At every point, we've been thwarted by the Lords, by law courts, by the judicial system. But we are finally, as you know, we've got the Rwanda bill on the statute book. The points-based immigration scheme is working. We've also been through some very difficult times with COVID and Ukraine and the geopolitics of China as well. So it's not just always like for like, but I accept it's a very difficult topic. It's a topic that lots of governments across the West are wrestling with. But the government's got a very clear plan on it, Sophie.
So the question was, what adjective would you use to describe the Conservative Party's record on immigration?
And the adjective I use is that this is a difficult topic.
No, that's not an adjective. What adjective would you use to describe the Conservative Party's record on immigration?
This is a very difficult topic, Sophie.
Well,
I'm not going to give you an adjective. What I'm going to try and do, because what I'm going to try and do is...
you know what the adjectives are like.
What I want to try and do is contextualise. This is a difficult challenge that many European countries are dealing with. You know that, I know that.
It's a fair point.
You also know there's lots of actions.
You have now contextualised it. What adjective would you choose?
Well, I haven't thought about an adjective, Sophie.
Do you want me to give you a couple of minutes, or what? I mean...
Well, we can take a couple of minutes if you want, but what I'd rather do is talk about both the context, which we've just done, just as you've played back some context, but also talk about the fact that we have a clear plan. You know that now. The Rwanda bill is on the statute book. It got there eventually. Well, this is a government that has a clear plan for it. It takes this issue really seriously. It is too high. The government, no ambiguity. The level of immigration is too high. The numbers we've seen today are that we've seen a reduction of around 10%, not enough, but a good start. Some of the measures we're taking are working. About a quarter of decline in terms of the number of people applying for visas. So you can see the trajectory. The direction of travel is clear. We have a plan. An election is about a choice. We have a plan. The Labour Party don't have a plan. In fact, they would promote an amnesty for people who come here illegally. That would just make the UK, in a difficult world and a difficult topic, a much bigger beacon for people to come here.
So net migration was 685,000 last year. Of course, when you guys came to power, David Cameron promised net migration at the tens of thousands. Now, if you'd honoured that pledge, an extra 1.4 million people would have entered Britain over the last 14 years. Instead, we've seen an extra 3.6 million people in that time. That's 3 Birminghams, that's 7 Manchesters.
And that's why this party is unequivocal that those levels are too high, Sophie.
It's your record. You have to own it. It's your record. You can't just ignore what's gone before.
Well, it's the facts of what's happened over a very difficult time in geopolitics. It's a fact that we're now measuring things that we weren't measuring before, because when we had free movement, we didn't have any controls. You couldn't capture the figures. Traditionally, those figures often underestimated the amount.
Net migration was 244,000 when the Conservative Party first came into power. It's now 685,000.
And the ONS themselves, because I read the report, the ONS themselves acknowledge that there have been measurement difficulties in the past. In fact, they've made significant underestimates of the number of people that were coming here under free movement before. So it's not like for like. If you drill into the figures, you've got lots of different moving parts. The Homes for Ukraine scheme, which is something I think we should all be very proud of, but of course it did increase the number of people who came here, and very similar to what we've done with British nationals overseas from China. So, you know, it is quite a complex topic. No one's saying it's not difficult. That is why Prime Minister took bold action, put those bills now on the statute book. He was clear today that because of the timing, the flights will take place if he's the one that walks through
We were talking about legal migration there. I think it's fair to say net migration, but we can move on to illegal migration if you like, because as you say...
If you're sitting at home and you're worried about your access to local healthcare facilities, the cost of rent in your area...
but the ways of dealing with these things are very different, right? You know that. So let's talk about illegal migration. Yeah. Rishi Sunak said today that flights to Rwanda won't take off before the election. That means he's lost his £1,000 bet with Piers Morgan, doesn't it? Is he going to cough up?
I'll let him and Piers sort that one out. I mean, the timetable...
He did shake on it, didn't he? He needs to give £1,000 to the Red Cross.
I'll let them sort that one out. The timetable of flights, because of, as you know, the process by which people have the right to appeal, the fact you've got to nominate carefully those who are eligible for that, was always going to be at the end of June, the beginning of July. So I think he said that because he's very straightforward about these things, but I don't think that's a change, Sophie, from what anybody expected.
No, but what has changed is the date for the election.
Sure.
It's not a coincidence, is it, that you've timed the election just before the flights go to Rwanda? Is it?
No, I have no idea, but I strongly doubt that, you know, in all of the difficult decisions about, you know, when we go to the country in this very uncertain world, this is an election about, you know, who's portraying the best economic and geopolitical security for this country, for our children and grandchildren. I strongly doubt that was one of the weighty factors. Much more importantly was to lay that choice in front of the electorate. He's been clear that, you know, he feels like an underdog, that, you know, I would say the opposition haven't had as much scrutiny. It's very easy, very easy. We're going to hear lots of people. You'll have them in this studio talking about our record in a very difficult period of time when the continent of Europe is at war, when we've been through this horrendous global pandemic. You know, that's the context.
When did you find out about the general election?
I found out about, I surmised it was going to be the case from the media about 20 minutes before it was announced.
Was it a surprise?
It was a surprise, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought about it greatly, but it was a surprise.
And what we're going to do as well, we're going to see so many examples of politicians going out and about, meeting voters, making small talk with strangers. That's always, you know, it's like kind of chaotic, unpredictable.
Electors. They're electors, not strangers. But
there you go. Electors. Yeah. New friends that we just haven't met yet,
It's a big moment for the country.
Yeah. And Rishi Sunak was out and about in Wales today. He met some workers in a brewery and he asked them if they were looking forward to the football. But Wales aren't in the Euros, are they? It's a bit awkward.
Well, maybe they choose a different team, Sophie.
You're anyone but England, do you think?
We shall see.
Okay.
We shall see.
And just finally, because I think it is only fair, you know, what's the big pitch then? You know, for viewers watching at home, what's the big pitch for the Conservative Party of the election?
Well, this is the moment of choice. It's the moment the country gets to decide what sort of future it wants, a secure future with the Conservatives, a plan that has started to work in most of the areas that the Prime Minister set out, or whether it wants to roll the dice, go back to square one. We haven't heard anything today from Labour about what their plan for the country is. That deserves real scrutiny, and I hope that it's going to get that over the next few weeks. We've got a plan, we're clear. This is what a choice in an election is all about.
Just finally, are you a bit relieved that Nigel Farage isn't standing?
Look, I mean, very clear. You know, if you vote for reform, I mean, I know Nigel Farage. I helped him when he was being debanked because, you know, the people were being too woke. I mean, everything I understand about Nigel Farage, some of the people that attempted to vote reform, is that they would find a Labour government which would offer an immigration amnesty, open borders, you know, some of the progressive agendas that the Labour Party have pursued, absolute anathema. So, you know, again, it's a choice. At an election,
They're not going to offer open borders. Come on.
Well, they've talked about going back into Europe. They're talking about
Who's talked about going back into Europe?
About dynamic alignment. About
Keir Starmer said he isn't going to be
sharing immigration, sharing burdens with Europe.
No. It's important.
Would move our border to the southern.
They haven't talked about going back into the EU.
They've talked about closer dynamic alignment. I didn't say going back to the EU.
You said going back into Europe.
Dynamic alignment with Europe and burden sharing on immigration that would move the UK's borders down to the south coast of the Mediterranean. Right now, the point was, if you're tempted to vote for reform, those are things that most people tell me are anathema, and a vote for reform is simply piling up more votes for Keir Starmer.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Andrew Griffith, good to have you on the programme tonight. Well, the election campaign will, of course, be featuring in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Deputy Editor of The Sun, Ryan Saby, and the Editor of The Courier, David Clegg. Now, I've got bad news. If you're a voter in a swing constituency, prepare to be inundated with leaflets and campaign visits. Might be time to disconnect that doorbell. But in the build-up to the election being called, we made Grimsby and Cleethorpes our target town. In a new single constituency, it's a target seat for both major parties. Previously a Labour stronghold, it turned Conservative in 2019. Well, our national correspondent Tom Parmenter has been seeing how the opening salvos of the election campaign have gone down in those target towns.
To get ready for summer, Cleethorpes has a new landmark. One that's popped up on the side of the Old Vic pub. It's optimistic, always sunny, like a politician looking for votes. So we bought a second-hand sofa and put it in the pub car park.
Well, Rob, as you've delivered it, do you want to be the first on the sofa?
I'd love to.
So we've got an election. What do you think is going to happen?
I think Conservatives will do it again. Just let's have another election, you know. I think they'll feel confident enough.
Even though the cost of living is still high
it
and
is
people
high,
are still
but
struggling.
It was a lot higher. The electric and gas is starting to come down and balance itself out now.
At the end of the day, what they've done, they're all for the rich and the poor are still poor.
What, and you think Labour would mend all that?
Amanda, you came and interrupted Rob then.
I did.
You feel strongly about this, don't you?
I do, yeah, because I'm a Labour person. I always have been.
You told me just before we started filming this that you've got a quite well-known relative.
I have.
Who's that?
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
And he's your...
He's my mum's brothers. It's the cousins.
You've not been round to the Somerset Pile to have a chat and catch up?
No, definitely not, no. But a lot of people don't like him either.
She's ready for an election, and so is Emmanuel, who works on the railway here.
What for you are the things that are going to sway which way you vote?
I think number one issue there is the cost of living. There's also the issue with the NHS. I think the waiting time when you try to request for any medical assistance, it takes a lot of time.
Are you ready for a change of government or stick with the same?
I think I'm ready for a change of government. So I believe a change of government should be able to come up with new ideas, come up with new strategy.
Are you sure which way you're going to vote this time?
No, I'm not sure. That's the problem.
Carol is a retired nurse.
The only thing that I think came out of the last with Boris, he did get us some money for the levelling up.
Levelling up?
The levelling up.
Do you think it's worked? Do you think people here feel that?
Well, not at the minute. What we've got to see for it.
Plenty of voters here are still waiting to be convinced as peak political season approaches. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Cleethorpes.
Well, coming up on the UK Tonight at 8 o'clock, we've got a special programme from Grimsby. Sarah J. Meat is going to be at the helm. SJ, what have you got planned for us?
Hi, Sophie. You were in Grimsby just a couple of weeks ago, weren't you? And as we've been explaining, it is one of our target towns. I'm actually in Cleethorpes tonight. We've been here all day talking to people because it was really interesting. You asked your MP guest there, Andrew Griffith, what the big pitch was. But what we're concentrating on here is what the local issues are, because it's all very well people saying, do you want Rishi Sunak or do you want Sir Keir Starmer? People are voting for their local MPs. This isn't a presidential race, and they'll be voting on local issues. I've been talking to lots of people today, and you saw it in Tom Parmenter's report there. There are a whole range of issues that affect their day-to-day lives. The common themes that come up: NHS, that difficulty in getting a GP appointment or a dental appointment. We've also been talking about housing. There's a lot of poverty here in Grimsby and Cleethorpes, and there's a lack of affordable housing, and there's a severe lack of social housing. We've also been talking about schools as well, and of course the cost of living was really high. And the question here is, do those in Westminster really get it? I was interviewing the Transport Secretary earlier on today, Mark Harper, and when I pressed him for his top three priorities, or the Conservatives' top three priorities going into this general election, he said economy, which you could argue includes, of course, the cost of living, but he also talked about immigration and national security. I haven't heard those last two mentioned that much here today, but we have got 6 weeks to go. So we've got a special programme here tonight from Cleethorpes. We're going to have a panel of guests, all people from the local area. We've got a panel of first-time voters, undecided voters, and of course there's another big story around today, isn't there? The Post Office inquiry. It's day 2 of Paula Venner's evidence. We'll bring you all you need to know from that on the UK Tonight special edition coming up at 8. We'll see you then.
Can't wait. See you then. Also looks like you picked the perfect place to go for a team drink after the show, SJ. I'll see you later. Thank you.
Always.
You're watching the Politics Hub coming up. 1066 and all that. We'll find out why Reform UK were referencing the Norman Conquest today with their leader, Richard Tice.
That has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides. And it's moving this way.
Only about half a mile from the Turkish coast, and it's evident that the boat is seriously overcrowded. This is one of the most severe viruses in the world.
I'm Alex Crawford, and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
This is going to be the biggest party Tripoli has ever seen.
That's it got us then. There's a lot of action going on, a lot of hits going in still. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place in news.
Clearly not had very much to eat at all. A lot of them extremely thin and very frail.
Look at her arms. I can put my entire hand round. This is the cocktail of drugs which the doctors at this hospital have been giving their coronavirus patients. Made for people who want clarity in an uncertain world.
Mother Nature can be vicious, absolutely savage. The world's largest falls now down to a trickle in places.
I can't imagine how much plastic is lying at the bottom of this huge lake. Whoa! Close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching the Politics Hub on Sky News, the top stories. Rishi Sunak has marked the first full day since he announced a general election with a whistle-stop tour of the country, promising economic stability. Keir Starmer has been campaigning in Kent with a claim that the election was called early to avoid the government's Rwanda policy being tested. And the SNP, Liberal Democrats and Reform UK have also begun their pitch to voters, although Nigel Farage has said he's not going to stand as a Reform candidate. And you can stay up to date with all the goings-on in Westminster and in the election campaign on our digital Politics Hub by scanning the QR code at the bottom of your screen. Right, now we can speak to the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Big day for you, election campaign launch. And of course, Nigel Farage announcing he's not going to be standing.
But he's also announced that he's going to be campaigning for us throughout the whole campaign, which I'm absolutely delighted with. So he's standing down from his broadcast responsibilities. Actually, that's going to be incredibly helpful. And sometimes if you stand and campaign elsewhere, you get sort of diverted and distracted when you're trying to win a seat, which he's experienced before. So look, it's great news. We're ready. We're going to stand 630, repeating that absolute pledge. No deals with the Tories. We're not doing that. And today's numbers, the mass immigration numbers that were confirmed by the ONS this morning, absolutely disgraceful. Complete betrayal by the Tories of all the promises that they made. A city way bigger than the size of Manchester, net, arrived in 2023 on top of another sort of 760,000 numbers being revised. No one voted for mass immigration. And this is the reason why people are feeling poorer, worse off, because we've got no economic growth and people are, everybody's feeling worse off. People's wages are going down.
You make the point that Nigel Farage said he's going to campaign for Reform UK, he's going to be busy doing that. But I just want to read part of his statement out. He also said, important though the general election is, the contest in the United States of America on November the 5th has a huge global significance. A strong America as a close ally is vital for our peace and security. I intend to help with the grassroots campaign in the USA in any way that I can. I mean, it sounds a bit like he's basically saying the US election's more important than the UK
No, what
election.
he's saying is they're both important, and he's doing both because he's campaigning for us.
Important though the general election is, then he talks about, I mean, come on, doesn't sound like he's saying that.
No, it's exactly the opposite. What he's saying is they're both important. That's why he's campaigning for us.
That's not what he's saying.
Hear me out. And then he's saying he's going to campaign later in America because he's completely right. The US is our most important strategic ally, both from a security and defence perspective, but also from a trading perspective. Our biggest single trading partner. And if President Donald Trump gets elected, and if Nigel helps that, then actually that's going to help Britain. So it's in Britain's interest what he's doing.
Now, you launched Reform's election campaign today against this graph. I think we can have a look at it. There you are. And you've got a graph showing immigration levels all the way back to 1066. So what were net migration levels in 1066?
The truth is there's been no net migration until about 19...
Hang on. How do we know the net migration levels in 1066?
We know that because the population hardly increased at all. And
Hang on.
Let's be very clear. The truth is, and the reality is, that the last 2 years...
No, I'm not talking about the last... No, but I'm not. This is my interview. Look. This is the net migration levels, 1066. I would argue net migration 1066 was pretty high. That was the year of the Norman Conquest, wasn't it?
Which is why we
when
said...
William the Conqueror came over.
Which is why we said 1066.
Which is when he came over with thousands of
Which is why we said since 1066 there's been no net migration.
No, it's on them.
Exactly, and the line starts at the end of 1066.
No, you didn't say 1067. It's 1066. That's when thousands of people... I mean, fair enough, they're probably more worried about the big boats than the small boats.
Focus on what concerns real people today, and that is in the last 2 years...
No, I'm not talking about 2 years.
You are talking about 2 years because that's what's making people poorer. That's what's making it harder. That's what's making it harder to receive health care. And that is also why we've got all sorts of other problems and why, for young people in particular, they can't get access to housing. Rents are 20% higher.
It's important, right? The way that politicians campaign, the truth-telling, graphs. I would have a go at the Lib Dems for their graphs. Look, we love a chart. We've never seen one that goes back to 1066. This is ridiculous. Why did you pick 1066?
Well, it's not ridiculous at all.
OK, explain. Why did you pick 1066?
Because you've just confirmed it. Since the Norman invasion, for heaven's sake. And since then, literally the last 2 years, we've seen more people settle in the UK than over the last 950 years up until 2000. And it puts it in context for people. The extent of the betrayal by the Tories, the extent of the lies and the deceit in the government. And for James cleverly to say today that there was a 10% reduction from the huge highs that they've created is frankly outrageous. And voters are sick of it. And that's why we're going up in the polls. And that's why they're panicked. And that's why they called this election a snap election, because they were concerned we're going up in the polls and they're sinking in the polls.
OK, you are standing, of course, in Boston's Skegness. You going to win?
Absolutely. And I tell you, from my inbox just this afternoon, since that's been confirmed, I'm absolutely delighted. Great polling there, so we stand to win, and we're going to win seats. We're going to surprise you all.
OK, and I have to ask as well, you know, the election campaign coming ahead, how many seats do you think you can actually win? Because I'll be honest, you know, and we can have a row about the voting system and so on, but historically, Brexit Party, UKIP, you just haven't been able to cut through in parliamentary seats. Is it not going to be the same this time round?
No, I think it's different this time around. The country is broken. People are furious with the main two parties, the lies. They're all the same. They're all variants of socialism, high tax, big state, mass immigration. People don't want that. And that's why this is an immigration election, and that's why we're going to surprise everybody on the upside.
How many seats do you reckon then?
Well, the more millions of votes we get, the more seats we get.
Yeah, but this is the thing, isn't it? You can pile up votes and not win any seats. That's a problem. Well, how many seats do you
You've just confirmed why actually we should have proportional representation. But look, we've got the situation where we will get seats and we'll get a good number of seats. I'm an optimist. You have to be an optimist in politics.
What's your optimistic guess then?
It's not a guess. I mean, you know, obviously...
Oh, if you know, that's even better. If it's knowledge, go on then.
No, look, I'm not going to make a prediction. What I'm going to say to people is if you want change, if you're not happy with the main two parties, if you don't want mass immigration, you've got to vote for change, vote for reform on July the 4th.
Thank you very much indeed. Richard Tice, the leader of Reform UK. Well, next up on the Politics Hub, still to come, we have your social media exploded with messages from the political parties, because you are not alone. We're going to we're going to tell you what they are up to. We've also got our election squad ready. There we go, Assemble Avengers. It's a huge year ahead, and we have got, that's our top team, taking you through the election coverage on Sky News, so we're going to have a bit more information of that as well. Right, in the meantime, we can speak now to Labour's Nick Thomas-Symonds. Great to have you on the programme today. Here we go, day one of the election campaign. We're talking a lot about immigration, because last year net migration was 685,000. Is that too high?
It is too high, and we would expect it to come down. There are some particular circumstances that have led to that. For example, homes to Ukraine, or, for example, British overseas passport holders coming over from Hong Kong. But overall, we would expect that level to come down on the regular migration side. But obviously, the government needs to be acting on the irregular migration side as well. We're up to nearly 10,000 people.
We'll talk about that in a moment, but just to focus on the legal migration numbers, you've said that that's too high. So what level would you like it to be at?
Well, I'm not going to put a figure on it because we've seen the damage that does to the debate before. I mean, we've just seen that figure of 685,000. When the Conservatives first came to power in 2010, their objective was to get that figure down to the tens of thousands. They never achieved it, and it really did contribute to a lack of trust in this debate.
I mean, Labour hasn't got a great record on this either, have you? Net migration was 5 times higher when you left power in 2010 than when you came in 1997.
Yes, but the raw numbers were a lot lower, though. That
but it's not a great record.
No, but the numbers were a lot lower then. I mean, what we've seen really is this enormous
still 5
increase.
Times higher.
Yes, the actual number's very low. I mean, in
so
comparison...
So it was fine then?
No.
It was OK?
No, I'm not saying it's OK. I'm making the point that it was nowhere near 685,000. It was at a much lower level. I'm not dismissing its significance, but that's just the point in terms of the numbers. But we've always set out that we will operate the point-based immigration system. Of course, we will look at the needs of the economy year by year, but we would expect that number to be coming down.
Let's talk about illegal migration, shall we? The Prime Minister, of course, confirming no flights to Rwanda before the election. We know what you were doing in Rwanda. You want to get rid of the scheme. What about the people who are already here in the UK? What would you do with the people on barges? Would you keep the Bibi Stockholm?
Well, we've always said that whether it is the Bibi Stockholm or whether it is the military camps, whether it's the hotels, we want to get back to a situation where we are only using the long-standing asylum accommodation that we've used for a number of years without issue. So that's what we have to do. Why? Because it is, firstly, it isn't pleasant for those people, but secondly, it is extraordinarily bad value for the taxpayer.
So just to be clear, if Labour come into power, you're going to try and move people off the barges, off the Bibi Stockholm, and put them into different... Is that right?
No, hang on. What we are going to do is to process the claims, which is what we need to do. That's one of the aspects on irregular migration where the government's been failing. We also need to get more returns agreements in place so that people who are not entitled to be here can be returned.
That's easier said than done, isn't it? Look, everyone wants a return agreement with France, but they said they won't make a bilateral returns agreement. They said it's got to go through the EU, don't they? Well, it's not that simple.
No, nobody is suggesting this is simple, but in terms of irregular migration, just take France as an example. Now, of course, the joint bilateral work we do with France is extremely important. There's an existing agreement from March of last year about our joint cooperation. Now, we will introduce a border security command that not only will be working with the French, but more broadly with Europol as well. You're right also to highlight that the government hasn't secured a wider returns agreement with the EU. They failed to do so.
But I think there's a reason that I'm asking the question about the Bibi Stockholm, because, look, I get your long-term ambitions, but they're not that easy to do. France has said that they won't do a bilateral agreement. You're talking about smashing the criminal gangs. No country in the world has successfully done that. Interpol say that it's extremely difficult to prosecute people smugglers. So what will you do? There's vulnerable people on the Bibi Stockholm now. Will you keep them there?
No, hang on. There is a bilateral agreement with France. It isn't a bilateral returns agreement, but there is a bilateral agreement in place about joint cooperation across the channel.
There's no bilateral returns agreement with France.
No, because that needs to be on an EU-wide basis. But we want to achieve a situation where you don't need the Bibi Stockholm. You don't need.
It's Labour policy to get rid of the Bibi Stockholm. Is that right?
You don't. Hang on. You don't. We don't want to see people in hotels, or on the Bibi Stockholm, or in these military encampments. We want to get back. Let me just speak here. We want to get back to a situation where we only use the long-standing asylum accommodation that was used for many years without an issue before the Conservatives lost control of our asylum system.
I get that's the ambition, but forgive me if I'm a bit sceptical. I just can't see how you can move all these people out of hotels, out of the Bibi Stockholm. These are vulnerable people. They deserve to have a bit of security about what's going to happen.
Of course they do, but you get there by driving down the asylum backlog. We've got like a backlog at the moment of tens of thousands of people, and they're there because of chronic incompetence on behalf of the government. That's why we've said we would actually be allocating the caseworkers that you need and have a proper returns and enforcement unit in the Home Office to get back control of our asylum system, which frankly has been in chaos under the Conservatives.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Always good to have you on the show.
Pleasure.
Nick Thomas-Symonds there. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. The political battle in your mobile phone has started. Who's been fastest out the blocks? We'll tell you. That's next. Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, you're going to see a lot of politicians on your screens over the next 6 weeks, and not just on your TV screens, because the parties are going to be bombarding your social media feeds with messaging as well in a digital campaign that's become just as important as more traditional tools. Our data and forensics editor Tom Cheshire has been looking at what happened on the online battleground since the starting gun was fired yesterday.
Every election we talk about being the biggest digital election, and that's not untrue. With 5 years between votes, the platforms move on. TikTok, for instance, wasn't the behemoth it is now. But this is different for a very old-fashioned reason. Money, lots of it. First, though, the launches. Now, despite being in ostensible control, the Conservative effort was a bit lacklustre. Just this rather busy tweet to start with. Compare that to Labour, which put out this slick video within minutes and with a very simple message of change. But it does speak to how prepared each side is. Labour was sending out fundraising emails and other calls to action. 5 hours after the election announcement, there was still none of that from the Tories. These are the basics of a digital campaign. And the weak Conservative launch also meant that their message was swamped by memes about Rishi Sunak's sodden Lord speech. Instead, you had things like this from viral menswear guru Derek Guy, saying that historically, men in this situation used a folding canopy called an umbrella. The Conservatives have been clicking into gear, though. This is the campaign springing into action late last night. Now, Meta, which owns WhatsApp, Instagram and Facebook, publishes all political adverts. And you can see the Tories are starting to experiment with different adverts here. And this is the good thing about the digital election. We can see it unfold pretty much in real time, reveal what the campaigns are focusing on. And we can go deeper too. If you look over here, you can see the sort of people who are seeing this advert by age and by sex, and how people are being targeted by political campaigns is going to be a big part of this election. Now, we're only talking hundreds of pounds over here in terms of what's being spent. This is experimental, but we're back to the money. Now, this is important. Campaigns were previously limited to spending £19.5 million over the course of an election. This year, that has gone up enormously to £35 million. And look at this. It's based on data from Who Targets Me, which tracks political adverts, and it shows how much parties have been spending on Meta since January. And you'll notice it has been growing all the time. There has been a shadow campaign going on even before local elections. This is the long election. It's also an expensive election. Nearly £5 million has been spent so far. Now, to put that in context, the 2019 general election, there was a total of £10 million spent. So only one short day into this short campaign, we've already seen half as much spent as in the whole of the last election. Digital is the vital battleground. There will be lots going on, much of it strange and new. TikTok influencers, YouTubers, AI, deepfakes, bots, 24-hour meme machines. Stick with us and we'll take you through it all over the coming weeks.
Tom Cheshire reporting there. Well, the surprise election announcements played havoc with a whole raft of important legislation that was winding its way through Parliament. We've now entered the period that's known as the wash-up, where parties try and work out what to get through and what to let quietly slip away. Our political correspondent Serena Barker-Singh reports now on the government's unfinished business.
The smoking ban, post office compensation, a football bill and the Tories' housing policy. Just some of the 16 government bills all still waiting on the shelf. But as Parliament officially dissolves next week, only ones that can pass through the House by tomorrow evening will make it through, in what's called wash-up. Starting today with the post office bill.
We will not leave this place till we have done our duty by those people. And it's common practice during wash-up that negotiations will be ongoing, and we will hope to update the House on further business.
But out of all of the government bills still waiting to get through Parliament, many have been cast aside. Only a few are certain to remain. These fast-track bills include the Digital Markets Bill, a Victims Bill, the Post Office Bill and the Finance Bill. But it also means Rishi Sunak's big plan to create a smoke-free generation looks like it's been stubbed out, as well as the government's long-promised reforms to housing policy.
It's definitely frustrating and potentially a lot of lost hours of staff time that has been spent on working on this bill. We need to know from all the major parties standing at the election what their offer will be for renters and how they will fix the bill.
Labour had been calling for an election for most of the year, but say Rishi Sunak has now reneged on many of his commitments.
His pledge on a smoke-free generation, plans for a football regulator, promises to renters and leaseholders and protections for our broadcasters, now all at risk.
Some bills are necessary, like the finance bill, which secures the budget. But all those that pass have to be fast-tracked.
It's definitely the case that wash-up is a terrible thing for parliamentary scrutiny. Bills which would normally go through weeks and hours of scrutiny, line-by-line scrutiny, may receive almost none at all.
A surprise early election date means now a scramble to pass through any remaining policy that might be possible. Serena Barker-Singh, Sky News.
Still to come on the Politics Hub. We've got our election squad ready. That is coming up after the break.
An enormous explosion has just come down.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
You either live and recover, or you die.
And I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry.
Legal abortion!
It is an anti-woman agenda. 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub, where we are gearing up for an epic election campaign here on Sky News.
The end of this gripping Premier League season, making it 7 straight wins.
When's Keir coming in?
I think they're going to kick off when she gets here.
You think of their defenders, you think of Carlos just over 6 foot away.
And our match commentators.
Right, let's see what this election studio is all about then.
Lost the crowd.
Hiya. All right, mate.
How are you, okay?
I'm good.
Sorry?
Come on, we've not got all night. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
Don't say no to this one.
Is this a prank? Is that Beatles about or something?
Yeah, Keir's about.
Look, Ed's already measuring up the screens.
Well, this is fantastic. We can have maps there, charts there, and more data over there.
As they feel the pressure, you've got to go tight in. Where's Sophie?
Enough Fergie time. Time for election time, I think you're fine. You can both... This is my studio.
We're gone as well?
Gone.
Oh, God.
See ya.
You're fired?
Oh, I'm not joking.
I've always wanted to take you on live, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, he's all mouth.
Yeah, I reckon we can work with this.
This place will be our home on Election Night Live, and we'll be ready to bring you the full story first, here on Sky News.
Nice to meet you.
You too, my darling. I'm coming this way first.
Hey, oh, yeah, she knows.
You're going there first.
See ya, thanks.
Much better.
still can't actually believe I managed to smuggle a Sheffield Wednesday mug onto the official election promo. I don't know how I managed to get away with that one. But let me bring a new or familiar face onto the Politics Hub team, Ali Fortescue. Now, this is really exciting because we're now in election campaign mode. I can tell you that Politics Hub is going 7 days a week.
It is.
And to allow me to kind of go and lie down in a dark room, we're also going to be seeing an awful lot more of Ali, which I'm so excited about.
It's
Ali.
so exciting. Well, Sophie, you can't possibly do 42 days in a row. Well, you probably could, but luckily for me, I'm being wheeled in on the weekends when you have a little break. And hopefully, maybe some exciting things will happen, because I guess that's the thing with an election campaign.
Yeah.
Anything can happen at any moment.
Anything can happen at any minute.
So-
And I'm genuinely so excited that we've got Ali
It's really exciting.
joining the Politics
A
Hub
bit
team.
scary, but exciting.
It's going to be brilliant. It's going to be absolutely brilliant. We're all very lucky to have you with us, and I'm sure you guys are going to love it as well. Look, the poll's open, as you can see, in 41 days, 8 hours and 4 minutes. So we've got 41 days to go. Ali, what are you most looking forward to about the election?
I am looking forward to, it's those unexpected moments, isn't it? You know, like Gordon Brown in the back of the taxi calling a member of the public a bigot. The moment when, was it in a campaign when Boris Johnson went into a fridge?
Oh,
that was an
yeah.
election campaign.
He literally tried to hide in a fridge.
I love these things that we don't expect suddenly cropping up.
Completely
And there's
agree.
also, you know, the kind of set piece manifesto, all that, pouring through that and getting something that could be interesting. But yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. And what an election. 20 points behind. I can't remember a time when a Prime Minister had done that and been the real underdog.
I don't think it's ever happened. Ali, thank you so much. We're going to see a lot more of Ali and a lot more of us as well. The first day of campaigning over, but we've got a long way to go. Up next, we're going to take you to Grimsby with the UK Tonight and Sarah Jane Mee.